I have been working as a security guard for almost 7 years now. The pay is decent, and the benefits are good enough to keep me around. Because of my experience, I get first pick on which shifts I want to work. Usually, I choose day shifts or early evenings with weekends off. But last month, my supervisor called me into his office with a request. They needed someone reliable to cover overnight shifts at a medical research facility about 40 minutes outside the city. The previous guard quit without notice. The extra pay was hard to turn down since I had some credit card debt to pay off. I agreed to take the position for a few weeks until they could find someone permanent. The facility was a 4-story building that used to be a medical research center. It had been closed down about 3 years ago, but the property management company still needed someone to watch over it. The place sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by empty fields and patches of woods. The access road leading to it was about 2 miles long from the main highway. There was a metal fence about 8 feet tall surrounding the property with an automatic gate at the entrance. The parking lot was huge, but completely empty except for wherever I parked my car. When I first arrived for my shift on Monday night, the place gave me an uneasy feeling. The building itself looked maintained on the outside, but you could tell it had been abandoned for a while. Inside was even worse. The hallways were long and sterile, lined with old laboratory rooms. Most of the medical equipment had been removed, but some things remained covered in white sheets. The smell of disinfectant still lingered in the air, mixing with dust and stale air. It was the kind of place that felt wrong even when nothing was happening. The security office was on the first floor near the main entrance. It had a desk, 3 monitors showing feeds from 16 cameras throughout the building, a small refrigerator, and an old swivel chair that squeaked every time I moved. The camera system was outdated but functional, covering most areas including the parking lot and main hallways. I spent the first night getting familiar with the layout, walking through each floor and checking all the rooms. Everything seemed secure. The first 3 nights were quiet. I sat in the office, watched the monitors, listened to sports radio, and ate the sandwiches I brought from home. The only sounds were the wind whistling through gaps in the window seals and the old heating system clanking and rattling. On my 4th night, which was Thursday, things started feeling different. Around 11 o'clock, while scanning through the camera feeds, I noticed something odd. The camera in the 3rd floor hallway had a strange blur across the lens, like someone had smeared something on it. I made a note in my logbook, figuring the camera was just malfunctioning or dirty. I continued my shift, trying not to think too much about it. But by 1 in the morning, a thick fog had started rolling in from the fields. Within 30 minutes, it was so dense I could barely see 10 feet out the window. The exterior cameras became almost useless, showing nothing but gray mist. I decided it would be better to do a patrol inside the building rather than stare at foggy camera screens. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, even though there was nobody to radio. Just having it made me feel a little better. I started on the 1st floor and worked my way up. The 1st and 2nd floors checked out fine. But when I reached the 3rd floor, I noticed the hallway lights were flickering more than usual. Some of the fluorescent bulbs were going in and out, creating these strobing shadows that made me uncomfortable. As I approached the area where that camera had been blurred, I saw something that made me stop cold. There were wet footprints on the floor. They led from a hallway window that was open just a crack to the back stairwell. I knelt down and touched one of the prints. It was still damp, fresh. My heart started pounding. Nobody was supposed to be in this building. The front gate had been closed when I arrived, and I had the only key to the building entrance. I stood up slowly, my hand instinctively moving to my hip where my firearm was holstered. I rarely carried it on me while doing rounds because this place always seemed so dead. But I had it now. I decided I needed to get back to the security office and check all the cameras again. Something was very wrong. I walked quickly back to the stairwell, trying to keep my footsteps quiet. My mind was racing. Could it be a homeless person who found a way in? Maybe a former employee who still had a key? When I got back to the office, I was almost jogging. I sat down at the monitors and started cycling through all the camera feeds systematically. That is when I saw it. Two other cameras on the third floor had been moved or covered. One was pointed at the ceiling and the other showed nothing but darkness, like someone had put tape over the lens. Then I switched to the rear parking lot camera. Through the fog, I could make out the shape of a dark-colored van parked near the back fence. It definitely was not there when I arrived. Someone was here. Multiple people, probably. My hands were shaking as I reached for the desk phone to call my supervisor. I picked up the receiver and heard nothing. No dial tone. The line was dead. I pulled out my cell phone and looked at the signal. 1 bar. I tried calling anyway, but the call would not go through. I thought about just running to my car right then, but my car was parked in the front lot. I would have to go through the main hallway to get there. That is when I heard it, a metallic sound like tools clanging together coming from somewhere deeper in the building. My stomach dropped. I went to the equipment locker and pulled out my gun. I checked it, fully loaded, safety on. I grabbed the radio again and tried to reach the central monitoring station, but all I got was static. Then I looked back at the monitors. 2 more camera feeds had gone black. They were cutting the cameras one by one, and they were getting closer. Suddenly, every light in the security office went out. The monitors died. Everything went black except for the faint glow of emergency lights in the hallway outside. I sat frozen in the darkness, listening. I could hear footsteps now, more than one person. They were on the first floor, speaking to each other in low voices I could not make out. I could not stay here. I had to get out. I knew the layout well enough by now. There was a back exit to the security office that led to a service hallway. From there, I could reach the east stairwell, go down to the basement, and use the emergency exit that led to the back of the building. It was risky, but staying here felt like a trap. I opened the back door as slowly and quietly as I could. The hallway was dark except for those dim emergency lights spaced every 20 feet. I used my flashlight sparingly, just quick flashes to orient myself, then turned it off immediately. I moved along the wall, my hands sliding against the cold, painted concrete as I felt my way forward. When I reached the east stairwell, I opened the door carefully. The stairwell was pitch black. I started descending, one hand on the railing, one hand holding my gun. I was trying to be silent, taking each step carefully. I made it down one flight, the basement level. Just as my foot touched the basement floor, I heard a door open somewhere above me. Then footsteps, fast footsteps, coming down the stairs. They were chasing me. I ran. I could not help it. Panic took over and I sprinted down the basement hallway, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. I needed to find the emergency exit. It was at the end of the hall, past the old storage room. But before I could get there, I remembered something. There was an old boiler room on the left side of the hallway. I could use it as a diversion. I ran to the boiler room door and threw it open hard, letting it slam shut behind me on its own. Then I kept running as quietly as I could now toward the storage area. I heard them stop at the boiler room. The door opened. Voices inside, searching. I used those precious seconds to get to the storage room. The storage room was filled with old metal shelving units and cardboard boxes. I weaved through them in the dark, using my flashlight to find the emergency exit at the back. The door had one of those heavy horizontal push bars. I shoved against it. It did not budge. I pushed harder. The mechanism was old and stuck. I put my shoulder into it and finally felt it give way. The door swung open and cold, wet air rushed in. The fog was even thicker out here. I stepped outside and found myself at the back of the building. I could see that dark van parked about 50 feet away. My car was in the front lot. I would have to run around the building to get to it. I stayed close to the wall and started moving along the back of the building. The fog helped hide me, but it also made it hard to see where I was going. Then I heard shouting from inside. They had discovered I was not in the boiler room. I heard the emergency exit door slam open behind me. I broke into a full sprint, running along the side of the building now. I could see my car in the distance, my blue Honda Civic parked near the front entrance. I fumbled for my keys while running, pressed the unlock button. The lights flashed. Behind me, I heard someone yell, "Stop, stop right there." I did not look back, I just ran harder, 30 feet from my car, 20 feet, 10 feet. I could hear their footsteps pounding behind me, getting closer. I reached the car, yanked the door open, jumped inside, and slammed it shut. I hit the lock button immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I looked in the rearview mirror. Two men in dark hoodies and face masks were running straight at me. One of them slammed his hand against my window. I turned the key. The engine started. I threw the car into reverse and hit the gas. The car lurched backward. I could see them in my mirrors, still running after me. I remembered the gate remote clipped to my sun visor. I grabbed it and pressed the button as I shifted into drive. The gate started opening slowly, too slowly. One of the men was holding something up, maybe a flashlight or a radio, I could not tell. I floored it. The gate was only halfway open, but I did not care. My car shot forward. The passenger side mirror clipped the gate post and shattered, but I made it through. I flew down that 2-mile access road doing 60 miles per hour through the fog, my heart hammering in my chest. About a mile down the road, I reached the main highway and finally had cell service. I pulled over on the shoulder, my hands still trembling, and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered immediately. 911, what is your emergency? I need police at the old medical research facility on Route 42, I said, my voice shaking. There are people inside. They chased me. I am the security guard. They broke in. Are you safe now, sir? Yes, I am on the highway, but they are still there. Officers are on the way. Stay on the line with me. I sat there on the side of the road, watching the fog swirl in my headlights, looking back toward the facility. I could barely see anything except a faint glow from the building lights through the mist. 20 minutes later, 3 police cars arrived. I gave them my statement and they asked me to follow them back to the facility. When we got there, the van was gone. The gate was still open from when I escaped. The police went inside with flashlights and searched the entire building. What they found made my blood run cold. The electrical system had been cut at the main breaker panel in the basement. Several cameras had been physically destroyed. The third-floor window I had seen was completely pried open from the outside. And in the boiler room where I had created my diversion, they found a professional lock-picking kit, latex gloves, and a backpack filled with empty plastic bags. One of the officers explained to me that this was likely a crew of professional thieves. They probably knew the building was abandoned and assumed there would be no security. They were planning to strip whatever valuable medical equipment remained and sell it. When they realized I was there, they tried to scare me off and cut all communications. You are lucky, the officer told me. If they had cornered you, this could have ended very differently. My company decided to increase security after that. They installed a new camera system, added motion detectors, and hired a second guard for overnight shifts. They offered to keep me on, but I requested to be transferred back to day shifts. They agreed without hesitation. To this day, when I think about that night, my heart still races. I was lucky in so many ways. Lucky the fog hid me when I ran. Lucky they did not have weapons, or at least did not use them. Lucky I knew the building layout well enough to find that emergency exit in the dark. I still work security, but I will never take another isolated overnight shift like that again. Some extra money just is not worth it. I took the night shift security job at St. Mary's Hospital mostly because I needed the money and nobody else wanted to work those hours. The place was being converted into a medical center, which meant most of it was under construction during the day and completely empty at night. My job was simple enough. Patrol 3 buildings, the main tower, the old abandoned wing and the parking structure, check the cameras every hour, and log anything unusual. The pay was decent for someone fresh out of college, and honestly, most nights were so quiet I could get through half a book during my shift. I'm Jake, 23 years old, and that Wednesday night started just like any other. I clocked in at 10 p.m., made my rounds, and settled into the security office in the main tower with a cup of coffee and my usual routine. Around 2:15 in the morning, I was doing my hourly camera check when something caught my eye on one of the monitors. A flickering light was moving across a third-floor window in the old wing. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting at the grainy image. The light looked like a flashlight beam, sweeping back and forth inside one of the rooms. That didn't make sense. The old wing had been completely shut down for 3 months. No power, no water, and definitely no reason for anyone to be inside at this hour. I cycled through the camera feeds for that building, but the renovation crew had already dismantled most of the surveillance system. Only 2 out of 6 cameras were still working, and neither one had a good angle on the third-floor interior. I picked up the phone and called Marcus, my supervisor, who was supposed to be on call overnight. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. I explained what I saw, and he yawned into the phone. "Probably just one of the electricians forgot to turn off their work light," he said. "But go ahead and check it out if you want. Just don't spend too much time over there." I hung up, but something about his explanation didn't sit right with me. I knew for a fact that no electrical work had been scheduled for tonight. The crew never worked past 6 p.m., and they always cleared out by the time I started my shift. I grabbed my flashlight, clipped my radio to my belt, and headed out to my bike. The hospital campus was spread across about 10 acres, and the fastest way to get between buildings was on the old mountain bike the company provided. As I pedaled across the empty parking lot toward the old wing, a cold wind kicked up that seemed way too strong for August. It made the back of my neck prickle. I locked my bike at the main entrance and pulled out my master key. The door creaked open, and I was hit immediately with the smell of dust, mildew, and fresh paint. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The first floor was exactly as I'd left it during my earlier patrol, full of construction equipment, tarps, and stacks of drywall. I made my way to the stairwell since the elevators had been shut down weeks ago. The stairs groaned under my weight as I climbed to the 3rd floor, each step echoing in the empty shaft. When I reached the 3rd floor hallway, I stopped and listened. Nothing but the sound of my own breathing and the faint hum of the building settling. I walked slowly down the corridor, shining my light into each room as I passed. Most of the doors were propped open, revealing gutted interiors with exposed wiring and holes in the walls. When I got to room 304, the room where I thought I'd seen the light, I pushed the door open wider and swept my flashlight across the space. The window was shut tight, covered in a layer of grime. There was no light, no equipment, nothing that could have caused what I saw on the camera. I stood there for a minute, trying to convince myself it must have been a reflection from a car's headlights on the main road. That happened sometimes. Satisfied, or at least willing to accept that explanation, I headed back downstairs, locked the entrance, and pedaled back to the security office. But as soon as I sat down and pulled up the camera feeds again, my stomach dropped. On the parking structure camera, the only one that still had a partial view of the old wing's back entrance, I could see someone climbing over the chain link fence. The figure was wearing a dark hoodie and carrying a backpack. They moved fast, staying in the shadows, deliberately avoiding the few working lights in the lot. I watched as they reached the back door of the old wing, the same door I had locked not 15 minutes earlier, and slipped inside. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the phone and called Marcus again. This time I didn't wait for him to speak. "Someone just broke into the old wing. I'm looking at them on camera right now." There was a pause, then Marcus said, "Call the police. Don't go over there alone, Jake. Just wait for them." I knew he was right, but I also knew that the local police response time in this area was anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. If this person was vandalizing the property or stealing copper wire, which had been a problem at other sites, I'd be the one who had to explain why I didn't at least try to stop them. I told Marcus I'd call the police, but I didn't promise to wait. I grabbed my radio, clipped a small air horn to my belt that we were supposed to use for emergencies, and headed back out to my bike. My heart was pounding the entire ride over. When I got to the back entrance, I immediately noticed something wrong. The door was still locked, just like I'd left it, but there were fresh smudges of mud on the handle. I unlocked it and pushed it open slowly, shining my flashlight inside. There on the tile floor were muddy boot prints leading down the hallway toward the stairwell. They were distinct and still wet, tracking dirt in a clear path. I followed them carefully, my pulse hammering in my ears. The prints led up to the second floor, and I could feel my throat tightening with every step I climbed. The second floor hallway was darker than the first, with more rooms that hadn't been touched yet by the renovation crew. The muddy tracks stopped outside room 212. The door was open just a crack. I stood there, barely breathing, and listened. I could hear something inside. A faint rustling sound, like someone going through a bag or moving equipment around. I raised my voice and called out, "Security. Come out now." The rustling stopped immediately. For a few seconds there was absolute silence. Then I heard rapid footsteps coming toward the door. I stepped back instinctively, raising my flashlight, but whoever it was didn't come out the front. Instead, I heard them running toward the back of the room and then the sound of a door slamming. I ran down the hallway to the rear exit and burst outside, but the back lot was empty. I swept my flashlight across the cracked pavement and the overgrown weeds, but there was no sign of anyone. Then I heard it, a metallic clanging sound coming from the old parking garage about 50 yards away. The garage was a separate structure, barely used anymore, with a rusted tin roof and concrete pillars that had started to crumble. I walked toward it, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. When I stepped inside, I froze. My bike, the one I had locked at the front entrance of the old wing, was lying on its side in the middle of the garage floor. I stared at it, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. There was no way it could have gotten here. I had locked it. I knew I had locked it. My hands went cold and I turned slowly, sweeping my light across the garage. That's when I saw him. About 20 feet away, standing perfectly still in the shadows, was a figure in a dark hoodie. I couldn't see his face. The hood was pulled low and the darkness underneath it was complete. He didn't say anything. He just stood there. I shouted, "Don't move. Police are coming." My voice cracked and I hated how scared I sounded. The figure tilted his head slightly like he was studying me, and then he started walking toward me. Not running, just walking, slow and deliberate. I fumbled for the air horn on my belt and pressed it. The sound was deafening, echoing off the concrete walls and tin roof. The figure stopped, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he turned and sprinted toward a side exit I hadn't noticed before. I didn't chase him. I couldn't. My legs felt like they were made of lead. I ran back to the security office, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial the phone. I called the police again and told them someone was still on the property and that I needed them here now. Then I sat down at my desk, staring at the camera monitors, trying to catch my breath. Every feed looked normal. Empty hallways, empty lots, nothing. The police arrived 25 minutes later, two officers who took my statement and then searched the entire old wing and the garage. They found the muddy boot prints, just like I'd described. They found the back door, which had been forced open, though someone had tried to relock it from the inside using a screwdriver to manipulate the latch. And in room 212, they found the backpack. Inside were a flashlight, a coil of rope, a pair of gloves, and a hand-drawn map of the old wing with certain rooms circled in red. One of the officers, a woman in her 40s with short gray hair, looked at me seriously and said, "Looks like someone was planning to steal construction equipment. You probably scared him off before he could get what he came for." The other officer asked me why my bike was in the garage when I said I'd locked it at the front entrance. I didn't have an answer. I still don't. The police stayed on the property for the rest of my shift, patrolling the perimeter and checking the buildings. I sat in the security office, drinking cold coffee and watching the sun come up. When Marcus arrived at 6 a.m. to relieve me, he clapped me on the shoulder and said I'd done the right thing by calling the cops. The company decided to upgrade security after that. They installed more cameras, added floodlights around the old wing, and hired a second guard for the night shift so no one would have to work alone. I requested a transfer to the day shift 2 weeks later, and they approved it without any questions. The guy in the hoodie was never caught. The police ran the prints from the boot treads in the backpack, but they didn't match anyone in the system. He never came back, at least not while I was working there. The hospital is fully operational now. I drive past it sometimes on my way to my new job, and every time I do, I think about that night. I think about the way he moved my bike, like he wanted me to know he'd been watching me the whole time. Like he wanted me to understand that he could have done anything he wanted and I wouldn't have been able to stop him. I still wonder why he did it. Was it just to mess with me? To prove he was in control? I'll never know. What I do know is that I'll never work a night shift alone again. And I'll never walk into a dark building without checking over my shoulder first. Because the scariest part wasn't the chase or the air horn or even finding my bike moved. It was realizing that for at least an hour that night, I wasn't the only one in that building. And whoever he was, he knew exactly where I was the whole time. This happened to me just last month, and I still get chills thinking about it. It was my first night working as a security guard at Henderson Storage Facility, one of those massive warehouse complexes on the outskirts of Detroit. I had just graduated from community college and needed a job fast to pay off my student loans. The pay was decent, and honestly, I thought it would be easy. Just walk around, check some doors, maybe watch cameras. How wrong I was. My supervisor that night was Maria, a woman in her mid-30s who had been doing security work for almost 10 years. She was professional, spoke clearly, and had this calm confidence that immediately put me at ease. When I met her in the security office at 11 p.m., she gave me a firm handshake and said, "Don't worry, Jake. I'll show you the ropes. Most nights are quiet. You'll do fine." She walked me through the basics: how to monitor the camera feeds, which doors to check during perimeter sweeps, how to fill out the incident log. The warehouse was huge, probably 200,000 square feet of storage space for various businesses. Maria explained that our main job was to make sure no one broke in and that everything stayed locked up tight. I felt nervous but excited. This was my first real job, and I wanted to prove myself. Around 12:30 a.m., Maria said it was time for our first perimeter check. We stepped out of the climate-controlled office into the cool October night. The air smelled like rain, and distant streetlights cast orange glows across the empty parking lot. We walked along the east side of the building, Maria pointing out security cameras and explaining their blind spots. Everything seemed normal, quiet, almost too quiet. Then we turned the corner toward the loading docks at the back of the facility. That's when Maria stopped dead in her tracks. I nearly bumped into her. She was staring at loading dock number 3. The massive rolling door was open, just a crack, maybe 6 inches of darkness visible underneath. Maria pulled out her clipboard and flipped through the day shift logs. "This door was supposed to be locked at 6 p.m., she muttered. She tried radioing the day shift supervisor, but there was no answer. He was off duty, probably asleep. She looked at me, her expression more serious now. "This is weird, but let's check it out. Stay close to me." My stomach tightened. This wasn't how I imagined my first night going. Maria grabbed the bottom of the door and pulled it up slowly. The metal groaned as it rolled upward. We ducked under and stepped inside. She hit the light switches and rows of fluorescent lights buzzed to life overhead, revealing the cavernous interior of the warehouse. It was like stepping into a maze. Huge storage racks stretched up 20 feet high, loaded with pallets of boxes, furniture, industrial equipment. The aisles between them were narrow and shadowy. Maria led the way, her flashlight sweeping left and right even though the lights were on. We walked down aisle 1, then 2, checking for anything unusual. Everything looked normal. But when we reached aisle 7, Maria stopped again. Several cardboard boxes were knocked over, their contents scattered across the concrete floor. I saw electronics, small appliances, packing materials strewn everywhere. "This wasn't like this during the day shift," Maria said quietly. She pulled out her radio. "Dispatch, this is Maria at Henderson Storage. We have a possible break-in. Items disturbed in aisle 7. No alarm triggered. The dispatcher's voice crackled back. Copy that, Maria. No alarms showing on our end. Proceed with caution. That's when we heard it. A sharp metallic clang echoed from somewhere deep in the warehouse toward the back where the refrigerated storage section was located. Maria's hand tightened around her flashlight. She whispered, "Stay close to me." We started moving toward the sound, our footsteps echoing in the vast space. The refrigerated section was at the far end of the warehouse, probably 200 feet away. As we approached, I could see the heavy insulated door with a small window at eye level. Maria reached for the handle and pulled. Cold air rushed out, hitting us like a wall. The temperature inside had to be somewhere between 35 and 40 degrees. My breath became visible immediately. Maria stepped inside and I followed. She flicked on her flashlight because the lights in this section weren't responding to the switch. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating rows of pallets stacked with frozen goods and temperature-sensitive products. Then I saw them, footprints, wet footprints on the concrete floor, fresh and glistening under the flashlight beam. Someone had been in here recently. Maria's voice came out steady but tense. "Dispatch, we have evidence of an intruder. Fresh footprints in the cold storage section. Requesting immediate backup." She started following the footprints deeper into the refrigerated area, and I stayed right behind her, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then they went out completely. Now we only had our flashlights. In the darkness, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing that wasn't coming from Maria or me. It was coming from behind a large pallet stacked with boxes about 15 feet ahead. Maria shouted, "Security, show yourself. We know you're in here." Silence. Then the sound of footsteps, fast and urgent, running toward the opposite end of the cold storage. Maria and I chased after them, our flashlights bouncing wildly. We reached the exit door just as it slammed shut. Maria grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. She pulled harder. "It's locked," she said, her voice rising slightly. "We're locked in." Maria immediately tried her radio, but the signal was weak, full of static and interference from all the metal shelving around us. I could barely make out the dispatcher's voice. Maria started kicking the door, yelling, "We're security guards, let us out." No response. Just the hum of the refrigeration units and our own breathing. I felt panic rising in my chest. We were trapped in a cold storage unit. How long before hypothermia set in? Maria must have seen the fear on my face because she put a hand on my shoulder. "Backup is coming, Jake. They know we're here. We just need to stay calm and find another way out." I nodded, trying to control my breathing. We started searching the room. That's when Maria spotted it, a ventilation grate in the ceiling about 12 feet up. "Help me stack these boxes," she said. We worked quickly, stacking sturdy boxes to create a makeshift ladder. As we worked, I heard footsteps outside the door. Multiple sets of footsteps walking around, casual almost. Maria stopped and yelled again, "We're security guards trapped in here. Let us out." The footsteps paused for a moment, then continued. No one answered. No one opened the door. The footsteps eventually faded away into silence. "Come on," Maria said urgently. We finished stacking the boxes and she climbed up first. She used the butt of her flashlight to kick at the vent cover until it popped loose and clattered to the floor. "You go first, Jake. I'll be right behind you." I climbed up and squeezed into the ventilation shaft. It was tight, narrow, and pitch black except for my flashlight. I started crawling forward on my hands and knees, the metal cold against my palms. Behind me, I could hear Maria pulling herself up into the shaft. Crawling through the ventilation system was claustrophobic and disorienting. The shaft seemed to go on forever, turning left, then right. Through grates in the floor of the duct, I could see the warehouse below, the aisles dimly lit by emergency lighting. Then I heard voices, muffled but distinct. I crawled forward until I reached a grate and peered down. 4 figures were moving around below, loading boxes onto hand trucks, working quickly and quietly. They were stealing inventory. I could see their faces partially, men and women dressed in dark clothing, moving with practiced efficiency. My hand slipped slightly, scraping against the metal with a small screech. One of the thieves looked up sharply, staring right at the vent where I was hiding. I froze, not even breathing. After what felt like an eternity, the thief shrugged and went back to work. Maria whispered from behind me, "Keep moving. We need to get out and meet back up outside." We crawled further until we found another vent opening that seemed to lead to the office area. Maria kicked it open as quietly as possible, and we dropped down into a small break room. The door to the hallway was closed. Maria slowly turned the handle and peeked out. Empty. We slipped into the corridor and started moving toward the main entrance. Our footsteps were soft, deliberate. Then I heard footsteps coming fast from around the corner ahead. Maria grabbed my arm and pulled me into the employee break room. We ducked behind the vending machines just as someone walked past in the hallway. Heavy boots, moving with purpose. We waited, barely breathing, counting the seconds. 30 seconds passed. Maria signaled and we moved again. We reached the main entrance area, and through the glass doors I could see the most beautiful sight of my life. Red and blue lights flashing, police cars, at least 3 of them. Maria grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, we're heading to the front entrance now." We rushed to the door and pushed it open. Several police officers were outside with their flashlights and weapons drawn. Maria yelled, "Security guards coming out." The officers recognized us and lowered their weapons, motioning us forward. We hurried over and Maria quickly explained the situation. 4 suspects inside, loading stolen goods. They locked us in the cold storage. The police moved into action immediately. An officer directed us to stay by one of the patrol cars while they handled it. We stood there, still shaking from adrenaline, watching as officers entered the warehouse with their guns drawn. I could hear shouting from inside, commands being given, sounds of a confrontation. About 10 minutes later, the police escorted 4 people out in handcuffs. 2 men and 2 women, all wearing dark clothes and gloves. As they walked past us toward the police cars, one of them, a tall man with a shaved head, turned and stared directly at me. His eyes were cold, angry. A chill ran down my spine even though the danger was over. A police lieutenant came over to us, a middle-aged man with graying hair. "You two did good work tonight. Thanks for calling it in and handling yourselves professionally. These suspects have been hitting warehouses all over the area for the past 3 weeks. This is our biggest bust yet." By 3 a.m., the police had finished processing the scene and securing the warehouse. Our senior supervisor, Mr. Chen, arrived to check on us. He was a stocky man in his 50s with a concerned expression. Maria and I gave detailed statements to the detectives, walking them through everything that happened. They told us the thieves had disabled the alarm system remotely, which explained why no alerts went off. They had been planning this job for days. After the police left, I sat in the break room with a cup of coffee that Mr. Chen had made. My hands were still shaking slightly, and I couldn't stop replaying the night in my head. Maria sat down next to me, her own coffee steaming in her hands. She looked tired but composed. "You did good tonight, Jake," she said. "Most people would have panicked in that cold storage, but you kept it together. That takes guts." I managed a weak smile. "I was terrified," she nodded. "Me too. But that's the job sometimes. Welcome to security work. Most nights are boring, nothing happens. But sometimes." She trailed off with a knowing smile, taking a sip of her coffee. Mr. Chen came over and offered me the option to take the rest of the week off to recover from the experience. I sat there for a moment, considering it. Part of me wanted to quit right then and there, to never set foot in a warehouse again. But another part of me, a part I didn't know I had, felt different. I looked at Mr. Chen and said, "I'll be here for my next shift. I want to finish what I started." Maria nodded approvingly. Mr. Chen clapped me on the shoulder. "That's what I like to hear." Driving home as the sun started to rise over Detroit, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I thought about everything that had happened. My first night as a security guard had been nothing like I expected. I had been trapped, terrified, chased by criminals. But I had also stayed calm when it mattered, followed Maria's lead, and helped catch 4 people who had been terrorizing businesses for weeks. I felt exhausted, completely drained. But underneath that exhaustion was something else. Pride. A sense that I had been tested and hadn't broken. I knew this job was more dangerous than I had imagined, but I also knew I could handle it. As I pulled into my apartment complex and killed the engine, I sat there for a moment in silence. My phone buzzed, a text from Maria. Get some rest. See you next week, partner. I smiled. Partner. Yeah, I could get used to that. I locked my car and headed inside, ready to sleep for about 12 hours straight. But I also knew that when my next shift came around, I would be ready. Ready for whatever came next. Because that's what security guards do. We show up, we do the job, and we protect what matters, even when it scares us half to death.